Welcome to this week's live stream. My name's Heidi, and I appreciate you being here. I see Line from Sweden is in the house. Thank you so much for your support, Line, and for your consistency of showing up regularly. We're actually talking about something today that came up in a conversation on, or a comment, but I call it a conversation when we respond back and forth a few times. Um, in a comment on my last video, the video about how I held resentment for 50 plus years of my life. And I always thought it was about what they were doing was making me feel resentful. I put a poll, and I had this problem last week. I put a poll in the live stream, in the chat. And Lena, can you tell me if you see that poll? I see other people are coming in to the live stream. We're talking about what I call, I have never heard anyone call it this before. I came up with the term emotional constipation because it basically, when we stuff our emotions, our feelings, we don't express them. And I don't mean that we have to blow up in anger or anything like that. But when we don't speak our truth, we essentially are suppressing our emotions. And what happens when we do that? Hey, Miss M, thanks for being here. Welcome. Can you see my poll? It seems like people are voting, but I wanted to pin it, but it's not giving me that option. And I can't. Oh, there we go. It's the only option it's giving me is end poll, and I don't want to end the poll. Yes, you see the poll. Perfect. Why won't it let me hold, please? Like I said, I had this problem last week or the week before with a poll, and to get it pinned to the top so I could always see it. Well, I'll just do it like that then. There probably won't be so many people here that the poll gets lost in the chat. So we got that going for us. Or maybe there will be. So emotional constipation. Basically, what I have found for myself to be true, and with all the clients, women that I've talked to, that when we suppress our emotions, when we don't talk about our feelings, and we don't necessarily have to talk about them with the person that did the thing to us, right? To process it, to get it to move. But when we don't talk about our feelings, our emotions, we are suppressing them and we end up, it's like we're constipated. And what happens? How do you feel when you haven't gone the bathroom for many days? I don't know, Line, how you do it when you're camping, but I would have to have a bucket with I've done this before, with a toilet lid that fits on the bucket so that I can go out and sit in the woods. I'm not a great squatter, and this is getting totally off topic, but just kind of funny. I'm not a great squatter, never have been. I was raised on a farm. I had to do that when I was young, when we were out in the fields or, wherever where there wasn't a bathroom, but I hated it. I absolutely hated it. So, um, I'm not great with that. So, I don't know if you can relate, Line, about that and when you're out camping. But back to the topic at hand, emotional constipation is when we don't express them. And I see now 67% is stuff them down. So this is very fitting for those of you that voted that. The other vote is to ruminate over them. So if you're just joining us live, I would love for you to vote in the poll. How do you deal with your feelings? Do you stuff them down? Do you ruminate over them? Do you think, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. Then you feel stressed or anxious or disappointed or, angry or whatever the feeling is, maybe you think that what you're feeling must be wrong. You must be being too sensitive, right? Or you try to ignore them, which is similar to stuffing them down, but a little bit different in that you like pretend they don't even exist, right? Versus taking the action to suppress them. So, would love to see your votes in the comments. In the Rockies, hi. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And Lena is laughing, I'm assuming about me having a hard time uh, going to the bathroom. I will just say that out in the woods. And I see there's more people here. Vote in the poll. How do you deal with your feelings? Do you suppress them? Do you stuff them down? That's what we're talking about today. So I call this emotional constipation. And what happens when we are constipated, right? First of all, it's painful, it's not comfortable. But that physical pain, right, we can deal with. We'll take a laxative, we'll do whatever. And eventually, we know, hopefully, that it will pass. I actually had to, no pun intended, I actually had to call 911 for my mom because she got physically constipated. And they had to, you know, do physical things to get it to move. And it but it was 2 days longer before she got relief. That is not good for our body. Emotional constipation, suppressing our emotions is not good for our bodies either. We don't typically, because we don't necessarily feel the physical pain like we do when we're physically constipated, because we don't necessarily feel that physical pain, we don't necessarily think anything is wrong. And because a lot of us were taught to suppress our emotions, right? Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Girls don't get angry. Girls don't behave that way. Girls don't, whatever, you fill in the blank for you, whatever that was for you. But so this is a conditioning, right? This is a pattern that we got into when we were young to not express ourselves. And that led me, I don't know about you, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, but that led me to not speak up. And so now for 50 plus years, I didn't speak what was on my mind. And that caused me, if someone hurt me, right? If I couldn't speak that hurt to them because I was taught it was wrong, then that made me, like, I feel myself holding on to the breath right now, right? That made me not speak up to them, which where can it go then? It can only go internally. So I suppressed my emotions, my feelings, my opinions, all of that for 50 plus years. And I have a list of things that resulted in my body and how it manifested in me. But at a higher level view, that resulted in me getting married 3 times and getting divorced 3 times. I truly believe that because I didn't know how to express myself, how to express my emotions, how to express my hurt or discomfort or whatever the thing was, um, that the other person was doing, and I just suppressed it all, that led me to these really difficult relationships. So, what I want to do in today's live is shift the perception that what emotions really are and what happens when we don't express them. And I already talked a little bit about that. And why does this matter? Because it impacts so much. It's not just as simple as calling 911 to go to the hospital to have them physically help you express the constipation, right? Why do we express dogs' anal glands? I know this is like really seems like off, but we do it because not doing it is not healthy for them, right? It's internalizing something that isn't healthy. So, why this matters, why us being able to express ourselves matters is because it impacts our health. I already talked about that a little bit, right? It builds up, suppressing our emotions, our feelings, builds up toxicity in the body, just like being physically constipated builds up toxicity in the body. Not expressing ourselves impacts our relationships. I already talked about that a little bit. It impacted 3 marriages for me in a negative way, right? It wasn't just them that was the problem. I wasn't expressing myself. I wasn't speaking up because of what I was taught when I was young. And it suppressing our emotions, it impacts your overall sense of peace, your overall sense of self-esteem and your worth. Because if you feel like your emotions are wrong or that they aren't valid, then where does that go? Right? It has to go somewhere. Eh, Not expressing ourselves, suppressing those emotions, they don't just go away. They manifest in some way, some form in your health, in your relationships, in your overall sense of peace and worth and self-esteem. So, I want us to look at emotions as messengers. They aren't random feelings that are coming up. They aren't something that you were just trained to be too sensitive or too emotional. They are messages. They are messengers of something that needs addressing, something that needs, I don't wanna say fixing, it doesn't need fixing, but it needs addressed. Otherwise, it will just internalize. Miss M said, "I feel like my feelings don't matter, so I tend to keep my feelings to myself." What, Miss M, do you think that comes from childhood? Why? What causes you to think that your feelings don't matter? And it totally makes sense. I think a lot of women in particular, because of how we were raised when we were young, we were trained, like I said, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about. Girls don't get mad, right? Don't hurt their feelings. And so we were trained. But I'm curious to know what runs through your head that makes you think that your feelings don't matter? Whose voice do you hear when you hear yourself say, "My feelings don't matter, so I'll just keep them to myself"? Yeah, it came from your childhood. Was it your mom that told you? Like, my mom told me, I heard so many times, "If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about," right? Those are the 2 main ones, and that taught me, right, that what I felt and who I wanted to be, how I wanted to express myself was wrong. So, emotions aren't negative. There are no there's no negative or positive emotion. They're just messages. They're just the body telling you something needs addressing. They're a signal or a notification. Um, think of them like maybe a smoke alarm in your house, right? It's telling you if it goes off that something needs addressing. Oh, so we have more votes. Stuffing them down seems to be the ruler here. Or then the next is ruminate over them. So our emotions tell us what we need, what is working and what's not working. Again, what needs to be addressed. Miss M said, my parents told me if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, right? Don't get mad at others, right? So you were taught to not express yourself and to not speak up when you were hurt, that was speaking up was not a good thing to do. So instead of us, because we didn't have the ability to analyze, wait, is this really how I want to move forward in my life, right? We didn't have that ability when we were 5 to do that. So we just took their what they told us as truth. And hi, Bev. Welcome. I appreciate you being here. I'm Heidi, and I do a live stream every Wednesday at 2:22 Eastern Time. So I appreciate you being here. We are talking about emotional constipation. And I would love to know if you would vote in the poll, how do you deal with your feelings? So far, stuffing them down seems to be the manner that we deal with them. And I compared stuffing them down to being to being physically constipated, right? What happens when we're physically constipated? Um, Bottom line is we are building up toxicity in our body, and the same thing happens. And I coined this term, I've never seen it used anywhere else. Um, but I coined this as emotional constipation when we stuff down our feelings, ruminate over them. Okay, so now we have 60% is stuff them down and 40% is to ruminate over them. Would love to know if you're one of the ruminators, like what do you think? I said something wrong. I shouldn't feel that way. What is the thought? If you put it in the chat, that would be great. It helps me keep this conversation going when you chat in the chat, because I can, and if you have any questions about it, put those in the chat for sure as well. And I will answer as many questions as I can in the time that we have here. We'll quit pretty close to the top of the hour so that you can kind of gauge your time accordingly. So, emotions aren't negative, they're signals, they're a notification that something needs to be addressed. They tell you what you need, what's working and what's not working. And ignoring the message, I would love for someone to comment on this. What happens when you ignore the message? When you ignore the feeling, when you ignore the emotion? Does it go away? Most likely not, right? Or I shouldn't say most likely not. It does not go away. The body stores it. I watched an amazing video over the weekend that he talked about emotional debt, and that when we don't express ourselves, and I don't mean holding on to it, building resentment, and then exploding. That's not expressing ourselves either. Expressing our truth is what I mean, in the moment that it's uncomfortable, but doing it anyway, because the cost of not doing it is that explosion, and that never results in a positive outcome. that explosion either goes internally as well. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I should have never said anything, right? And that builds up more. I really hurt their feelings. And in that moment when we exploded, we did do more harm than if we would have just spoken our truth to begin with, right? So what was I talking about? Sometimes that happens. I lose my train of thought. Um, oh, I watched this amazing video and he was talking about emotional debt and that the more we don't express ourselves every time something happens, that it's like credit. It's like a creditor coming and we there is going to be a payment, there is going to be interest on that emotion that we're suppressing the longer we suppress it. And the interest, what happens to a loan, right? The interest compounds over time. And so, oh, I just got goosebumps. So it's not that suppressing it is going to make it go away. It doesn't go away because the body keeps score. I want you to hear that. The body keeps score. The body doesn't say, oh, you don't want to think about it anymore? Okay, we'll let it go. It doesn't work that way. I will tell you a story that I wasn't planning on sharing. But with my third marriage, before we were married, it was we had been dating for a year and a half. I was in yoga. I did a sit up in yoga, and I realized as I sat up and landed on like my sits bones, there was a lump there. Uh, and it was painful. I had to like lean to the side in order to not have pain from it. I made it through the rest of class. I didn't do any more sit-ups. I just rolled over and, sat up on my side versus up on my sits bones. Line said, I don't stuff my feelings down. I try to analyze my feelings and figure out why I feel the way I do. So I overthink it a lot. Yeah. And again, they're not going anywhere, right? And I'm going to give you a couple things at the end that you can to help you shift that a little bit instead of thinking about them and ruminating on them. Um, so I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But so after class, went in, got in the shower, like felt back there what was going on, and there was a very large, like this size of a lump right um how do I say this without saying it? Basically right at the opening of the colon. And I was like, no pun intended, holy crap, what is happening? I have a tumor, right? That was my first thought. I went to the doctor. I think it was on the weekend. I got an appointment, went to the doctor right away, and I ended up having what's called a perianal abscess. Never heard of it before, but I truly believe, without going into more detail, I had surgery 4 times, not local anesthesia, completely under general anesthesia in a hospital 4 times over the next 6 months to try and get this resolved, and it would not resolve through each of the surgeries. That was a lot of cost. That was a lot of when you go under general anesthesia, that is a lot of, um, what's the word? A lot of, stress. It's not the word I was thinking of, but a lot of stress on the body, right? Every time you do it, and I did it 4 times in 6 months. After we got married, um, I told the surgeon I didn't want any more treatment. I wanted because it wasn't healing. I wanted to see what would happen if I let my body do its own thing. We ended up, for those of you that know me and know the story, he stormed out 10 months later in a rage. I figured out that he was very toxic, and uh, I never had to, my body healed that wound. I never had to do another thing with it. I've never seen that surgeon since then, and that was 8 or 9 years ago. I truly believe that my body, over the 1.5 years that we were dating, my body was telling me something with that, and because I wasn't listening to the more subtle cues, it was like, "Okay, here, I'll give you a huge abscess that is painful and is going to torment you until you do something about this." And I truly believe that if he and I had not met, that would have never manifested in my body. So, our body keeps score, and you may not think because you don't have an abscess like I did or something physical that's manifesting, but your body is keeping score. I just worked with a client that ended up with lung cancer. Now, we could say it's from smoking, but I truly believe that this manifested as a result of her staying in a toxic marriage for 20 years. And she had a lot more prior to that. The body builds up and keeps score, and then it may come out in a way that you don't relate to what happened, like what you were suppressing. But I'm telling you, the body knows, and the body can't process it. It has nowhere to go. You are responsible for processing it in a way that allows it to move through you instead of staying in you. So that's why I put the choices, because stuffing the feelings down, ruminating over them, thinking they must be wrong, that you must be wrong, trying to ignore them. None of those options allow them to move through you. Again, remember, the feeling, the emotion is just a an indicator. It's just a message. It's just a messenger. It's not about you. It's about something that you need to address, but it doesn't mean anything about you and who you are. Okay, so when we don't express, again, they get internalized. Toxic, right? It can manifest. I just explained that in health, stress, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, illness. It can manifest in relationships, having resentment, being passive aggressive, being sarcastic to try and avoid avoid it, right? To skirt around it, hoping they'll figure it out. It manifests in misunderstandings with other people, in distance with them. It disconnects you from other people when you don't express yourself honestly. That's the key, is expressing it in the moment in an honest way. It ends up being a mental load, anxiety, feeling stuck, like you can't move forward in life, overwhelm, right? So, this is a result of emotional constipation. These feelings get stuck inside, and we end up with that emotional debt. And that debt has to be paid in some way, some shape or form. And it may not be instant, and that's why we think, "Oh, I'm over it," right? Because we didn't get some debtor calling at the door, some debt collector immediately. So we think, oh, but I went 18 months with this person suppressing signs and feelings and emotions. And then the debt collector came calling through an abscess, right? And then I still married the guy. So I didn't get the lesson until it was over. And thank God it wasn't in the form of a stroke or a heart attack or, something um, more impactful. But I developed in my second marriage, he had an affair in year 2. I suppressed my emotions, my feelings about it because I didn't wanna be rejected, I didn't wanna be abandoned, so I suppressed my voice, and what sits right next to the voice? Our thyroid, and I got Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I didn't put this together until recently, and that was 20 years ago. But that my thyroid was telling me, hello, if you're not going to speak up, we're going to do something about it. And now I still take thyroid medication today because of that. Miss M said, sometimes I feel guilty for feeling all of my feelings and I feel like I don't matter. You feel guilty for feeling all of your feelings, like guilty guilty for feeling them or guilty if you were to express them? Where is the guilt coming from? Because we all have feelings and emotions, right? There's nothing to feel guilty about. Maybe you feel guilty because you're freaking pissed off at this person for taking advantage of you so much. Is that where the guilt is coming from? And you feel guilty for feeling that way about that person? That resentment from them taking advantage of you is coming from you not speaking up so much. We think the resentment is coming from them. It's not coming from them. It's coming from the anger toward ourselves of not standing up for ourselves, of not having our own back. And what happens is I put the link to the video um where this thought came from, the video that I created. Uh and in it I talk about when we say they're taking advantage of me, what that allows us to do is put the blame on them, that if only they would change, I would feel better. So Miss M, I would ask you, like, I feel guilty for not telling. Oh, okay. Um, okay. So my next question would be, what keeps you from telling other people how you feel? Right? You're in this loop of, because I think, right, you were trained when you were young that your feelings don't matter. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, right? So now I feel something about this situation with this person, but I don't tell them. And now I feel guilty for not telling them how I feel, but I can't tell them how I feel, right? So you're just in this loop. I can't tell them how I feel because I was taught not to, that I had to be nice, right? And so now I don't speak up. I don't tell them how I feel. Now I feel guilty for not telling them how I feel, but I can't tell them how I feel because I was taught that that would hurt them or that that would hurt their feelings. And so now I am taking it on and I suppress my emotions because I can't tell them how, right? So you're just going in this endless loop. And I'm going to talk to you in a little bit, all of you, about how do we get out of this loop, right? Because It's not their responsibility to get us out of the loop. It's our responsibility, right? And there is just a shift that we need to make to start like getting off of this hamster wheel, but we have to step off of it. So I talked about this just a little bit ago now. Whose problem is it? Often we get stuck in their pushback or their actions, right? Or their disappointment or the hurt look on their face, right? And we allow that to say to us, "Oh, I said something wrong. I created that emotion in them." But the real shift is to look at your internal response and to recognize that your goal, your ultimate goal is to speak your truth, is to allow those emotions to move through you. We want them to like pass through us like white puffy clouds, right? Not to stick in there like this dark cloud, like the debt, right? But if we don't express it, and again, it doesn't necessarily always have to be expressed to that person. Sometimes a feeling is just a feeling about, like you said, Miss M, the feeling of feeling guilty. That doesn't necessarily have to be expressed to someone else. It can also be expressed to an unbiased person, right? But the ability to be able to express it, to allow it to move through. I've learned over the last 3 or 4 years that I am someone who needs a sounding board. I don't necessarily, if I try to process things in my own head, I will ruminate for days on something. If I can start speaking it out loud, and that's why these lives are so good for me. You think I'm doing it for you. I'm selfishly 50% at least doing it for me because as I express myself, I am like, "Oh, I've never thought of it that way before." Right? Or they may ask me a question back, my sounding board person, or you putting something in the chat that I'm like, "Oh, I've never thought of that way before." So again, not pushing your emotions or your feelings down or your thoughts down or your opinions down because you think they're not right or that someone might think you're silly or weird or, stupid for feeling this way. It doesn't matter what someone else you might think, well, emotional constipation, that is really, really ridiculous to relate it that way. For me, it works, right? And if I can better my life through expressing myself this way, then I'm going to continue to do it. So find what works for you. It might be needing to go to the person, right? It might be an unbiased person, a sounding board, so that you can get a different perspective on it. Coming to these lives hopefully is giving you a different perspective on things. And that's what it's all about, allowing ourselves to shift and think, oh, for one thing, I'm not alone. So many of us feel alone. Oh, that's what get me teary in what we're going through, right? And so, and that then when we feel alone, it's like, well, then I feel shame for what I'm feeling, which makes me want to suppress it even more. And what happens, shame thrives in secrecy. So when we don't express ourselves in various ways, maybe it's through journaling for you, right? But I've found when I express myself this way and then you chat in the comments, I'm like, I felt alone for 50 years in my life, right? And now I don't feel so alone anymore. And I know that other people can that lands with them as well. So the shame can no longer thrive because it's not in secrecy anymore. Oh, Miss M said, I feel very alone. You are not alone. And I appreciate and um, congratulate you so much for showing up here and for speaking up because, again, this is how maybe you found a place, a community where you won't feel so alone. Um, I think maybe you were in the last live where I talked about the primal question and taking that assessment. It's free. Go to primalquestion.com. You will find your primal question. I would guess maybe yours is, am I loved? Um, that is mine. That's my primal question. And the fear of someone with a primal question, am I loved, is I'm alone. That is like the core fear is I'm alone in this. I'm alone in this life, in this world. And even being, surrounded by people, many times we can still feel alone. So I hear you, I get you, and I appreciate you so much being here and being courageous to show up and put your comments in the chat because you can get healing and movement through sharing what you're going through, and you help others realize that they're not alone either, right? So thank you again for sharing that. I appreciate you so much being here. How much time do we have? Oh my gosh, we're way past time. Um, so let's wrap up here. There is a cost to silence. There's also a discomfort in telling our truth, but we have to look at what is greater, right? Is feeling the guilt day after day after day and ruminating on how you feel, suppressing, maybe having health issues or relationship disconnects, are those costs less than the discomfort that you might feel? No. I'll answer that for you. No. The discomfort is temporary. The discomfort of you speaking up, the discomfort of you taking a step is temporary. I guarantee it. You are not going to die by speaking your truth. Yes, there may be tears. I very rarely can speak a truth to someone that I've been holding on to for a while without me getting emotional in the form of tears. That's just me. And it has gotten better the more I speak my truth and the more I've learned the words to use that kind of set me up for success in that conversation and don't and the words that I use that doesn't put the other person in a defensive mode, right? Where they can hear me. Because many times when we explode, they get defensive immediately, like, what did I do? What did I do to deserve this? You're making way too much, right? And then they get defensive and they can't hear you. So setting yourself up to be heard by using by communicating in a way that they can stay open to hear what you have to say is really important. One more thing, my mind gets dark. I'll leave it at that. I'm sure you'll understand. Like you go to dark places. Yeah, we all have the shadow side and we think that it's wrong, that there's something wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with that. It's normal. Everything has a polarity, light and dark, right and wrong, positive and negative. It's the energy of the universe is polarized. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be here. It has to be that way. It has to be polarized. So the cost of silence. Choosing brief discomfort now for your own peace later. And I tell you, when you start speaking your truth and not suppressing those emotions, so much shifts. You will feel so much lighter, freer, and more peaceful in your everyday life. So, what does letting go really look like? How do we let go of this? Knowing that you have the right to say no probably is the biggest thing. Knowing that childhood programming is just that. It was just conditioning to keep your caretakers more comfortable because they didn't know what to do with your emotions or how to help you or how to support you. That's what I feel like it was for my mom. She was brought up in a non-emotional, they weren't emotionally demonstrative, my grandparents, and neither set. And my dad was super quiet. And so she didn't know what to do with my emotions when I would cry. She didn't ask what was wrong because she didn't know what to do with it. So just realize that it's just programming. It's just the recording that you're running to stuff down these emotions. It's not the way it needs to stay. And speaking your truth is so much better than that. Knowing that you have the right to speak up in whatever situation it is. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be anything. It just needs to be your truth said in a kind way. So, acknowledging the message, right? What is that feeling telling you? Miss M, what is the feeling of guilt trying to communicate to you? What is the message from it? It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be uh, anything other than that part of you wants you to start speaking up. I don't know what it is for you, but just sit and look at, what is guilt really telling me? Remember this, the ego is made up. We make up our ego. But then it knows it's made up and it knows it needs to continue to show up in order to survive. And so it needs to be right. Our intuition whispers. So the guilt is your ego. What is your intuition telling you about how you're feeling? What that feeling is, what that person did, how they hurt you. What's your intuition, your inner knowing telling you, your higher self, whatever you want to call it. Don't listen to the ego shouting. It's like a little kid. So, what is the feeling telling you? The next step is understanding the pattern. What role are you playing in this situation by not speaking up, by continuing to ruminate, by stuffing down the feelings? What role are you playing? Like for me, with the abscess, right? I ignored the subtle signals that it was giving me. The role I was playing was just go along to get along, right? Don't upset the apple cart, don't rock the boat. And then the third step is taking action, setting a small boundary, communicating your truth and saying, this isn't comfortable for me because, and here's some words, right? Here's what I do now. This isn't comfortable for me to say this because I haven't spoken up in the past. And so, therefore, I know this might come as a surprise to you what I'm going to say. And then you say the thing that you need to say and leave it at that. Tell them, I don't need a response from you. I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to hear me. Or maybe you do want something from them, but make it be about your truth and speaking it in a kind way. And recognize that you did the best you could with what you knew. that you are unlearning this conditioning that you were taught when you were young. So that's what I have for you today. I would challenge you, what's one feeling that you've been suppressing or avoiding or ruminating over that you could work through this week? And I appreciate you all being here. Remember, I go live every Wednesday at 2:22 Eastern Time. The Inner Circle membership is now available. That's where you will get more support on these types of topics. We will go deeper dive. There is a meditation audio already in that membership that is yours for the listening to every day. It's um, a stress reliever, an anxiety reliever that you can listen to as often as you want. So go grab that if that speaks to you. And by you joining the membership, it supports me in creating more content like this. It's a low cost way to support me in doing the work that I'm doing by putting this healing content out on YouTube and on the internet. So I appreciate you again being here. If you're watching the replay, thank you for watching the replay. Put in the comments what you got out of this live stream, and I will see you next week. All right. Have a great week, everybody, and take care. I'll talk to you next week.